for agreeing to come here today. This is awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This is good. So maybe if you start by telling a little bit about yourself and Solana and the story behind Solana, I think that would be interesting for everyone.
Yeah, sure. For those who don't know, Solana was started in late 2017, early 2018. So this was a time when Ethereum had proven itself as viable for a few use cases. DeFi was in its very, very early infancy, but particularly what we saw was CryptoKitties, an NFT game with tens of thousands of users, for the first time hitting that kind of virality and rapid growth that we were used to seeing in consumer internet applications. And it ground Ethereum to a halt, and gas fees went up, and the network became really slow. So in 2017-18, we were part of a wave of projects that aimed to solve scalability in blockchain. But our approach was to bring kind of the best distributed systems, operating systems, and wireless network engineers that we could find. And our team is led by Anatoly, who spent 12 years at Qualcomm solving all the hardest computing problems. So the opportunity we saw was, what if we take a swing at believing that blockchain isn't just going to reach 100,000 users or 1 million users? What if it's going to really rapidly hit 1 billion users, like within 5 or 10 years? What does that look like? And what is the network that you would build with all of the principles that we know from building wireless networks that have scaled to billions of devices, and rebuild blockchain from scratch? So the thought experiment was, how do you get the cost and the latency of a network that achieves global consensus on one single state machine, unsharded? So there's not sharded liquidity. There isn't sharding of applications or users. It's all on one state machine, because that's what seemed to be working in Ethereum and Bitcoin. And what if the challenge is to reduce latency to the physical properties, the amount of time that it takes for nodes to communicate and reach consensus, limited only by the speed of light around the Earth. And what if the cost could be brought down to the cost of hardware that it takes to run the network? And what if you build the software in a way that gets out of the way of the hardware, so that as Moore's law and Nielsen's law increase the power of computing, which has pretty reliably been happening at a rate of about 2x every couple years, and as Nielsen's law improves the network bandwidth of residential and commercial internet around the world, that this network would just naturally improve. And we have a core engineering team that did this with wireless networking and phones. They built the operating systems that powered 2G flip phones when there were millions of users, all the way through 4G smartphones with 1 billion devices, and it was the same kernel, the same operating system. So I think the thing that we came into the space and really were shouting from the mountaintops about was that these systems don't have to be slow. We've all seen an explosion of devices and networks that are fast and responsive and work at a global level with billions of people. It's been done before. It just takes a while to build the systems, and it takes people who have actually seen them work in production, know how to stress test them, and know how to think ahead. And you have to throw a decent amount of money and a lot of people against a wall, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. So it's been I guess 4 years since then, and the network launched in 2020. And I think in the first 6 months, the collective realization across the industry was, okay, it seems like this thing actually works. It's not a pipe dream. And then we started seeing DeFi take off with things like Serum. And this is important. What we focus on with Solana is applications that couldn't exist on sharded networks. We really wanted to see what are the things that need a single global state machine. And an on-chain central limit order book like Serum is something that you still haven't seen anywhere else other than Solana. And that's one of the backbones of the DeFi ecosystem on Solana is shared liquidity around this open source permissionless order book. And from there, what we're seeing right now is the last year has just been an NFT explosion. So the story of Solana is, we wanted for the core primitive, which is self-custody of assets, the ability to trade permissionlessly around the world, to just feel like Web 2, feel like Facebook, be very fast and responsive. We really knocked that one out fast. We proved out in DeFi that the system was resilient and that it could handle billions of dollars of flows. And now it's in a pretty aggressive user onboarding phase. And NFTs are the most consumable, easy thing for users to understand and get the idea of like, what is a wallet? What is self-custody? What does it mean to actually trade a digital asset with somebody halfway across the world? So yeah, that's the story so far. It's been quite a ride.
Yeah, and I would say I've been following it from the sidelines and also did install the node. I've been through the entire process. I had it up and running for several months until the disk was full, and then I was like, it proved this point. It was like basically running nonstop. So I would say it's very high quality software, because if you all know, if you build a distributed system and you connect a lot of different nodes with each other and you want them all to run all the time, that's not happening. Usually it's not happening. It just crashes, you find a lot of bugs and so on. So seeing stuff run for months and basically die due to hardware is what you want to see. So it's clearly a high quality piece of code. Also, Cherish that like it's built on Rust is one of the most stable basically programming language you could build on. So really good to see that. But thinking about these things, is there anything you would have done differently today? Is there any learnings from looking back now? You look at it, it's up and running, users are torturing it every day, basically, and what are the learnings you would have done differently from this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the approach as I've kind of described it is pretty pragmatic. The goal with Solana was never to reinvent things. It was always to just pile up the biggest risks and use tried and true practices like time division multiple access, which is used in wireless networks, and the key innovation was a source of time before consensus. We didn't invent a new hashing algorithm or anything. We used SHA-256. It's what all hardware is kind of optimized for, and it's just a looping recursive hash function that represents passage of time. So there's a lot of very pragmatic decisions that have been made, to ship and create a scalable system. But I think a few areas where we would have done things differently probably would have, as we see right now, there's congestion sometimes and botting for these NFT auctions. Sometimes creates performance degradation. It's all because we used UDP, which is a communication protocol that's a little older, a little less bleeding edge, but Quick is a communication protocol that Google developed. It allows for more fine-grained flow control. It's and swapping out some of these architectural choices, it takes a little bit of time, and we're in progress of that right now. So there's a couple architectural decisions I think we would have made differently. I think as far as the ecosystem is concerned, we've always had one validator client. We probably would have invested earlier, more aggressively in having more validator client teams. That's happening now. So I think a lot of the choices we would have made it differently. I'm pretty proud and happy to say it's hard to find the ones that we would have that could have drastically changed the course of Solana's success in life so far. But I think a lot of it is just a victim of growing really fast. I don't think we really expected that we would see 6 million transactions per second of ingress over art auctions within 2 years of the network being live, or that the network would be so adopted across all exchanges and wallets, and analytics platforms that the concerns around something like validator client diversity would be so salient so quickly. Next time, if there is one, maybe we'll do these things better.
That sounds good. And again, About the internet, many have said that the entire internet is in beta, and basically we changed from before the internet, where software was written and there was like beta period and it was tested and then it was done and so on. Now everything in beta all the time. And if you look at crypto, some might claim that it's actually in alpha when it's still running, all of it. And it looks sometimes where there's big crashes and stuff goes bad and so on. And that's like, I don't think that's actually the case, but the interesting thing to look at is like, what is the resilience points you build into to Solana, and how do you look about like making this really resilient? Because that's a core part when you store value.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big question. Like resilience. I think the most resilient thing you can do with a blockchain network is make it diversified in its use cases, in its stakeholders, in the profiles of stakeholders. I think it is like an alpha, and you know, it's I think the last speaker was talking about interoperability across chains, and with TradFi, Solana, I think from the beginning has not been intensely focused on interoperability, because I think it is like an alpha, and these chains are, last speaker was talking about taking millennia for markets to develop and evolve. Evolve is exactly the right word, because these things are like organisms. Yes. You know, it's like a delicate, growing, evolving organism, and it's an ecosystem is the right word to use, because it has to start from something small that connects with individual users. And this is why NFTs are so flabbergasting to so many people. They don't understand, why are people trading, images of animals to the tune of billions of dollars? Most people don't get it, but I think of it like, the early internet. And we have to retrain our understanding of how people interact with new technologies. And remember, the early internet, the first reason that many people set up an email account was to get that dancing baby GIF, from their cousin halfway across the world. And they didn't know what email was. They didn't get what a protocol is. They barely understood how the internet works, but they knew that for the first time, they didn't have to, call their cousin with a prepaid, card where they're paying 10 cents a minute to have a conversation. All of a sudden now he can send a video that looks like something, out of just a fever dream, right? And the world sharing that at the same time was the way that most people started to see something that was visceral and interesting enough to get to train themselves on, like, what is an email address? What is yahoo.com? What is Yahoo? What is a domain? And these are questions that we take for granted now, that people understand how URLs work, HTTPS colons, these are things that we had to explain to our parents, and they're complicated user behaviors. And I think in Solana, we've really tried to respect the whole ecosystem. Kind of views this through that lens, right? That it's a new technology, it's a new primitive, it's something that is going to be most powerful when 1 billion people know how to use it the way they know how to use email every day. And we're not taking any shortcuts, right? We don't focus on custodial wallets as much and obfuscating, these protocols and this direct on-chain interaction from users. We want you to evolve the wallets and interfaces to make these things easier, but still make them direct, right? So I think the most resilient thing you can do is build on that foundation with every decision you make, right? So every grant that we write, every protocol and library and framework that we create, it's all focused on users having self-custody, interacting with each other directly on chain, and getting trained up in these things. And this is why, even with the last week, I think this is a great test of resilience, right? There's a giant collapse of a very fundamental, what was considered by many to be a very fundamental building block in DeFi, and I think what we saw is 24 hours of frantic questioning. Is there contagion? Is this is this going to affect Solana DeFi? Is it going to affect TVL? And I think what quickly surfaced is, okay, there wasn't really much UST bridged over into the Solana ecosystem. It's a pretty self-sustaining ecosystem of other stablecoins that are very, fundamentally more backed and secure. And the main question was just, is the fear from the market going to slow things down? And what we saw is, I think it was easy to predict in retrospect, but within 48 hours, the NFT, it all just starts with the NFTs, right? It's these people don't wait and stop because they're afraid of the markets. They see themselves as part of a cultural movement where they're building off of each other's art, and there are people that feel, free because they can even just make a few dollars from their art where they weren't able to do that before. And that type of dynamic does not care about the markets, right? It doesn't care about a stablecoin blow up on another chain. It persists. So, this is, I think, I'm not sure we could have predicted this exact way that resilience would have proven itself out against such a black swan event, but that focus on users finding the joy of experiencing a new technology to connect together is, that's the most resilient thing I think you see across many big wins in the last several decades of new technologies proliferating.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's. I can't help but concluding what you said before, that the generation of the internet, they were basically raised on dancing babies and kittens, and the generation of crypto is raised on monkeys and punks, right?
Totally.
This is how it is, and
yeah.
we're learning. We are all like in this process right now, which is beautiful. But yeah, it's awesome. So can you tell me a little bit about like the use cases of Solana and where you see it like today? What are the main uses? What use cases? What are you excited about? But also, where do you think it's going? What's the future there?
Yeah, I mean, so. Just like I mentioned, Serum, order book, something that couldn't happen on a sharded chain, couldn't happen on a slow chain, or an expensive chain. I think those are the things that, I tend to focus on and get really excited about. And there are new, global networks that are getting bootstrapped using, token economic models that incentivize early usage and adoption and sharing in these networks. I think those are what are happening now that's pretty exciting. So like Hive Mapper is a good example. It's an open source mapping alternative to to OpenStreetMaps and Google Maps, where early contributors to this mapping system are basically putting dash cams in their cars that are sideways facing, and as they drive, if you're driving an Uber, if you're driving, just on a road trip, if you're in a remote area that happens to be, not very well mapped out right now, you're earning tokens by filling those blank spots in the map with Street View data. And this is really, exciting. It can only happen if somebody, knows reliably what the market is for their contribution to a network. It can only happen, if you bootstrap in a way that the end result, the end product, that map is useful to to enterprise mapping customers and to consumers, and these token dynamics allow for those early contributors to create something that's very viable as a competitor to something as big and monolithic as a Google Map from a centralized service provider through this distributed network of gig workers. And that's really exciting because I think Helium really proved this out, that you can do things that seemed impossible when you activate a global network of people that just see the incentive to to contribute in hard local ways. Helium, for those that don't know, has I think over 500,000 hotspots around the world, and they're creating a mesh network for low energy and low bandwidth Internet of Things devices, but they're also now creating a 5G network. And 5G is really hard. That was a hard problem that actually telcos were struggling to figure out how to roll out, because the range for 5G towers is very small. So getting the property rights to get these towers around where there's no holes in coverage is very difficult. You need people on the ground to set up hotspots in their house and be incentivized to maybe hack together an antenna that gets a little higher to get more coverage because they're seeing the economic value in being an early contributor and builder of that network. A similar dynamic is happening with Render, also built on Solana. It's this is, if you've watched like Westworld or Game of Thrones, the opening credit scenes are very high fidelity. The Marvel credits. This is all built with Octane engine. It's a distributed render farm, and now they're creating a global distributed marketplace with the Render token for anyone to be able to access that network and contribute GPU resources to that network. So I think these are interesting. I'd love to see like an electric car charging network where it doesn't matter where you are, you're always 2 minutes away from an outlet that's charging. I think springing up these types of networks is really interesting. And then there's so much more I could just go on about what's possible. This is what's lighting developers' minds on fire. That's why there's such an intense momentum around Solana developer activity. But I know we're getting low on time. I think gaming is super interesting. Just like gaming is going to be huge this year. It's going to be incredible.
It is. I totally agree, and I share many of your excitements also for Helium, which again a huge shout out to that. It's amazing. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed your inspiring excitement about Solana and everything that's being built in crypto. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.